Jayano Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Later, Prabhupada was sitting on the veranda outside his room at his forest bungalow as he sat watching the Shantila, preparing the Vinchani Bhagavatam in his mind. He could smell the aromatic spices cooking on the ghee. He called to Gagamuni and asked that a plate of Shantila's cooking be brought to him. When it was ready, soon Prabhupada was enjoying a meal of rice, dal, porridge, spicy sabjis and chutney. He said that Shantila cooked wonderfully and that devotees in all the ISKCON temples should learn this art. If the meat eaters could take such prashadam, he said, they would give up their sinful habit. As Prabhupada sat in his hotel room that evening with a few disciples at his feet, he reminisced about how he had come to America in 1965 and had suffered 2 heart attacks at sea. They say that anyone who gets a 3rd heart attack, said Prabhupada, they must expire. I had 2 attacks on the ship and in New York a 3rd one. Paralyzed, left side was paralyzed. I do not know how I was saved. A one girl, that captain's wife, she studied astrology. She said, Swami, if you can survive your 70th year, you will live for 100 years. Srila Prabhupada and his disciples laughed. So Prabhupada continued, somehow or other I have survived my 70th year. I do not know whether. They say I will live for 100 years, but 70 years was severe. 3 heart attacks and paralysis, and I was without any family. At that time, none of you were with me. I was alone. I was dependent on anyone. I wasn't dependent on anyone. But on the ship, I saw that Krishna was going to save me. I was going for his mission. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's Canto 5, Chapter 13. Rahugana converses with Jad Bharat, and it's text 7. So, Sure, Rita, Swaha, Kwa, Cha, Nivina, Chitta, Shure, Rita, Swaha, Kwa, Cha, Nivina, Chitta,
Surairita, Swakwa, Cha, Nivina, Chitta, Sochan, Vimuhan,
Upayati, Kashmalam, Sochan, Vimuyan, Upayati, Kashmalam,
Sochan, Vimuyan, Upayati, Kashmalam,
Kachit, cha Gandhava Puram Pravishta Vachicha Gandhava Puram Pravishta Pramodate Nivrittavan Muhurtam Pramodate Nivrittavan Muhurtam Shureritam Swaha Kwacha Nivina Chittaha Shochan Vimuyan Upayati Kashmalam Kvachishcha Gandhava Puram Pravishta Pramodate Nivrittavan Muhurtam Shureritam Swakva Nivina Chetaha Sochan Vimuyan Upayati Kashmalam Vachik Gandhava Puram Pravishta Pramodate Nivrittavan Muhurtam Surya by very powerful enemies Hrita Swaha all of those whose possessions have been stolen Kacha sometimes Nirvina Chetaha very morose and aggrieved at heart morose oh sorry it's not things Sochan deeply lamenting Vimuyan becoming bewildered Upayati achieves Kashmalam unconsciousness Kvachit sometimes Cha also Gandhava Puram an imaginary city in the forest Pravishta having entered Pramodate he enjoys Nivrittavat exactly like a person who has achieved success Muhurtam for a moment only Translation sometimes being defeated or plundered by a superior, powerful agent, a living entity loses all his possessions. He then becomes very morose, and lamenting their loss, he sometimes becomes unconscious. Sometimes he imagines a great palatial city in which he desires to live happily with his family members and riches. He thinks himself duly satisfied, if this is possible. But such so-called happiness continues only for a moment. The word Gandhava Puram is very significant in this verse. Sometimes in the forest a very big castle appears, and this is called a castle in the air. Actually the castle does not exist anywhere but in one's imagination. This is called Gandhava Pura. In the material forest, the conditioned soul sometimes contemplates great castles and skyscrapers, and he wastes his energy for such things, hoping to live in them very peacefully with his family forever. However, the laws of nature do not allow this. When he enters such castles, he temporarily thinks that he is very happy, even though his happiness is impermanent. His happiness may last for a few years, but because the owner of the castle has to leave the castle at the time of death, everything is eventually lost. This is the way of worldly transactions. Such happiness is described by Vidyapati as the happiness one derives from seeing a drop of water in the desert. The desert is heated by scorching sunshine, and if we want to reduce the desert temperature, we need huge amounts of water, millions and millions of gallons. What effect will one drop have? Water certainly has value, but one drop of water cannot reduce the heat of the desert. In this material world, everyone is ambitious, but the heat is very scorching. What will an imaginary castle in the air do to help? Srila Vijayapati has therefore sung, Tatala Sekate Vari Bindu Sama Sutta Mita Ramani Samache. The happiness of family life, friends and society is compared to a drop of water in the scorching desert. The entire world is busy trying to attain happiness because happiness is the prerogative of the living being. Unfortunately, due to falling in contact with the material world, the living entity simply struggles for existence. Even if one becomes happy for a while, a very powerful enemy may plunder everything. There are many instances in which businessmen suddenly became paupers in the street. Yet the nature of material existence is such that foolish people are attracted to these transactions and they forget the real business of self-realization. Om Ajnanatirandasyayanandana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manavisham Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gayamaya Tadati Swavadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're continuing on here with the dark picture that Jad Barrett is painting of material existence. And so previous to this verse, he was talking about how household life is like a forest fire, and even if you do accumulate money, it's stolen from you by the government. And then in this chapter again, this text again, the same point is being made. There's no happiness in the material world, and the idea that there is happiness is just imagination. So Prabhupada explains that sometimes in the forest a person imagines a castle, but the castle doesn't actually exist. In the same way, people imagine that they're going to be happy, but all they get in the desert is a drop of water, and a drop of water in the desert doesn't really do anybody much good. It just gives you the idea that it is going to get good. But actually, what can a drop of water do to help you in the desert? It's almost like an insult. If you come up to somebody in the desert and they're dying of thirst and you give them a drop of water, it's almost like an insult, isn't it? It's like to irritate you even further and just give you a drop of water, which kind of lets you know that there must be, it reminds you that it is wonderful to have water and to be able to drink water, but this tiny drop is just giving you a glimpse of what you're looking for. So the love and the so-called happiness in the material world is a tiny glimpse of the happiness and the love that's there in the spiritual world which we've left behind. So that just reminds us of, creates even more pain. Oh my God, I belong in a place where there's lots of water and I can splash around and drink it and swim in it, and here I am in this desert getting a drop of water. So it's a struggle for existence. And Srila Prabhupada was saying actually, because everything is temporary, that even if you do manage to just compromise with the material world and decide, okay, well, I'm in the desert, I'm only getting a drop of water, but I'm fine with that. I'm okay. I accept I'll only get a drop of water, so fine. But even then, you cannot stay in the desert permanently. Even then, you're kicked out. Even if you try to adjust everything and try to accept things for what they are, even then you can't stay. No matter how hard you struggle, you get kicked out at the time of death. But And then Prabhupada ends by saying, it is the nature of material existence that foolish people are attracted to these transactions and they forget the real business of self-realization. So, does anyone know an example of how that is displayed in nature? There's one section in the Bhagavatam where it's referring to different animals and they teach different things. And there's one insect, and the lesson it teaches us is that because we're attracted to something, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good for us. So the example that's given is the example of the moth. Because the moth flies.
Is it 24 gurus? No. Is it the section of the 24 gurus?
Yeah, I'm not sure, I was wondering. That's in the 11th canto, is it?
I forgot the name of this sage. He was playing a python.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he was actually, I think it was Narada Muni that met him, and he said, you're actually quite plump.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, the Lord is very kind. So he was just lying there, whatever rolled his way, he opened his mouth and ate it. And he was well looked after by the Lord. So he talks there about different gurus. I remember the moth flying into the fire, and also the deer being attracted by the male being attracted by the female by the smell of the musk. And so by the sense of smell, he's destroyed, and the moth by the sense of sight is destroyed. So in different ways the senses are victimized. And people generally like to say, well, if it feels good, do it. Just that's what your senses are telling you to do. If that's what you're attracted to, just fly into the fire. Just do it. That's a famous saying, isn't it? Just do it. And it's Nike. Just do it. Don't worry about the consequences. It feels good. Okay, great. Jump off a high building with an elastic band around you, and don't worry whether the elastic band is long enough. Some people do that. They jump, and the elastic band is too long, so they just hit the floor. So giving up Shreyas for Prayas. Prayas is the immediate benefit, and Shreyas is the long-term benefit. Nobody wants to think what's long-term these days. So Prabhupada mentions, I've never heard of this before, but he says that sometimes in the forest, a person can think that he sees a castle. Sometimes in the forest, a very big castle appears, and this is called a castle in the air. So not only are we illusioned in the first place, because the material world is an illusion in itself, but then on top of that, which is like a gross illusion of things made out of material elements, then we have another illusion, which is what your mind is coming up with. So you can hallucinate. So in the first place, the material world is not real, and then on top of that, you imagine a castle in the forest, so that's even less real. And then, on top of that, you can take some intoxication and go and live in the castle. So then you have an illusion upon an illusion upon an illusion. So the further you get away from the truth, then the more defeated you are in the human form of life. The idea is to try and find out, well, what is the truth? If this is not real, what is the truth? Not trying to create more illusions on top of the illusions already there. So, and the nature of the material energy is, if you become further and further away from the truth, then you go lower and lower down in the species of life. So you're defeated, and you waste so much time in the material world. So the situation is quite hopeless, really. Material energy means it's very difficult to overcome. So it's practically impossible to distinguish reality from illusion in the material world, because the illusion is so good. It's Krishna's energy, and everything Krishna does is perfect. So Krishna can create the perfect illusion. And the perfect illusion is that it seems real. That is the perfect illusion. That it seems real, and it makes you forget what is real. After being in the material world for a period of time, you become conditioned. So it seems like a very dark picture. If somebody was to challenge that and say, well, you know, I want to be happy in the material world, okay, maybe there is God, and maybe I do belong in heaven or the spiritual world with God, but here I am right now in the material world, so therefore, let me just make the best use of the bad bargain and not be so pessimistic. So what is the benefit of being pessimistic? Is there any benefit to being pessimistic?
Well, you don't buy the illusion that you could be happy. You don't believe in the illusion that you could be happy. Like people who are pessimistic, they don't believe they can be happy, or everything is dark and meaningless. And in one sense it's true. But the problem with the pessimistic people is they only see that side and they don't see the bright side. There is an option to that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because we can be pessimists and happy at the same time because we know the alternative. And we can get a glimpse into the alternative at times. When we're doing our chanting or our puja, we get a glimpse into something else, some other world, so then we're very happy to be pessimistic about this material world because we want to get out. So it's like, can you be happy in prison? You can be happy in prison. You can be pessimistic about staying in prison, but you can be happy in prison because you're digging a tunnel to get out. And every day you get a few more spoonfuls of dirt out, and then when the prison warden comes, you cover it over with a carpet so he doesn't see. And as soon as he's gone, the carpet's back out, and you get a few more spoonfuls out. So you're very sad that you're in the prison, but you're very happy that every day you're getting a little bit closer to getting out of prison and never having to come back. And other people in the prison, they're sad and depressed also, but they're just sad and depressed. They've got no alternative. They've got nothing to look forward to. And some people are even more foolish than the pessimistic ones. They're happy in the prison, they're thinking it's great. What's the problem, you know? Maybe they were born in prison and they've never known anything else, so this is just normality for them. And we say, no, there's grass fields and you can run around and you don't have to get forced to do things, you can just do whatever you like. And they say, well, you're just dreaming, that's just imagination. You have to be in the real world. So that's what condition means. Condition means to forget what reality is and to accept something else as reality. Accept ourselves as reality as well. So it's referred to as we're heavily conditioned, and by the practice of devotional service, we're reducing the conditioning, we're purifying ourselves with the conditioning, so that we become free from it. And the essential ingredient is the false ego, because it's the false ego that identifies us with the material energy. So if we can get rid of the false ego, then we can still be in the body, we can still look and speak in the same way, but we're now aware that we're not identifying anymore with that. But to get rid of the false ego takes time, generally, for most of us. And Srila Prabhupada said that the sound of the Maha Mantra dissolves the false ego. So it's like pouring acid onto the false ego, and just each day you're chanting, and the more pure your chanting becomes, the more absorbed, the more you're burning up that false ego. And then eventually you become like a dried coconut, because a dried coconut is, the flesh is inside, but it's no longer attached to the shell. So when you shake a dried coconut, it rattles around inside. So when somebody no longer has any false ego, they're in their shell of their body, but they're no longer identifying with it. like Prahlad Maharaj, he wasn't aware when he was eating or sleeping. All those activities were going on automatically. He was so oblivious to his body. He was so absorbed in spiritual consciousness that he wasn't. These other things were just going on automatically. He wasn't really aware of them. And it's Jayabara is continuing on with the same analogy of the material world being like a forest. Because if you're in the forest, there's a lot of dangers in the forest. It's a dangerous place actually in the forest. Without any dwelling place, you're just wandering around in the forest, and you don't know where you've come from, and you don't really know where you're going. The forest is also dark, densely dark. When you go into these deep forests where they have big trees, the sun is blocked out, and you're scrambling around in the forest. You've lost your way. So any questions or comments?
I wanted to ask about this castle in the air, but because I don't understand this analogy.
Yeah, it's not a generally. I don't know whether it's an Indian phrase, castle in the air. The Prabhupada refers also to that type of thing, something being in the air as being phantasmagoria. I think it's flowers in the sky. I think he refers to that as well. It says it's phantasmagoria, a flower can go out of the sky. So these are imaginary things, distorting the our perception. And it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada, there's a few occasions where Srila Prabhupada saw something and he referred to it, and the disciples couldn't see it. There was one where they were flying, and Prabhupada says you could see Mount Meru, and so the disciples were looking through the window, and they were trying to rationalize what Prabhupada was saying, and Prabhupada was quite adamant. He says, no, I can see it. I can see it. And so then the disciples realized, okay, well, you must have such a purified consciousness that you can see. He sees the deities are alive and are talking. We get a glimpse when we look at the lives of the great acharyas that they had a dialogue, direct dialogue with the deities. So a whole different realm of perception is going on as the false ego is removed. We become purified. And there's one, I was just speaking yesterday to Krishna, and he was talking about the moon, and Prabhupada said they didn't go to the moon, or even if they did go to the moon, they didn't see the moon for what it really was, because it's a different dimension, really, the living entities that are on the moon, we wouldn't be able to perceive them, just like we can't see the demigods, because we have a gross body, so we relate to things made out of earth, predominantly earth. That's the way our senses are tuned. So to be able to see these things, perceive these things, then consciousness has to be raised to a higher level. We're getting just a glimpse of what we're actually capable of doing with a consciousness which is unfettered by any false ego, any identification with the body or the mind. What that must be like, to be in that state of consciousness, free of all these distracting elements. Anyway, it's nice that the point came up this morning in the affirmations, Mahatma wrote the conclusion, was that you don't judge your mind by where he is, but what his goals are. So if someone's chanting and their chanting is not very good, but they want to chant purely, and they want to chant with a deep absorption, and they have a strong desire to do that, then that's more important than where they are right now. The direction that you're going in is more important than the particular situation you're in right now. So similarly, we can aspire for coming to the stage of having pure consciousness and make a continued, sustained effort to do that, to achieve that level of consciousness. So that the one thing that we're not trying to do, which most people are, is we're not trying to become happy within the material world. But that doesn't mean, to qualify that doesn't mean that we're not happy in the material world, but it means that we're happy knowing that we can't be happy in the material world, so we don't even try. Because we realize that the real happiness is something we have to establish within ourselves, and if we can attain inner happiness, regardless of the external circumstances, then that's real happiness. Otherwise, the happiness that we have is a reactional happiness, is that I am happy so long as there's this amount of money in the bank, my wife has this type of figure, I get all my flowers blooming in spring, and there's so many, it's dependent upon so many factors which are all precarious. So that type of happiness is all the time tottering. At any moment, anything can there can be there's always different fluctuations going on in the material world. So that type of happiness will not really provide real happiness. But if we can find ourselves happy and satisfied when things go wrong, and things don't go the way we planned, when things get taken away from us, and we're still okay, we're still happy, then we know we're getting a glimpse of what real happiness is.
Yeah, I have a question. Like Prabhupada said, devotees, they could live a comfortable life. He didn't say devotees, he said you can live a comfortable life at the same time be Krishna conscious. But how to draw a line of not being over comfortable and sometimes it's a gray area where maybe you have more than you need. So
yeah.
How to draw this line?
Well, there's an example given in the Bhagavatam. I've written it down actually, but I'll probably be able to find it right now. But it's about Swayambhuva Manu. And Swayambhuva Manu had phenomenal opulence. And he was able to enjoy himself. He was leading a good life. He was getting good food, nice ladies serving him, and nice wives. So everything was hunky-dory for him. But at the same time, he was fully aware that it was all transitory, and that his ultimate salvation was based upon his consciousness of God and his relationship with God. So that is the ideal. It's like if you see with Srila Prabhupada, he would sit down and he would eat the finest food of silverware, and he does look very impeccably dressed, and you could see he was completely materially satisfied. He knew how to get the best out of the material energy without being victimized by the material energy. Because there's an interesting story, because Srila Prabhupada would get things given to him all the time, So, and then he would accept it very graciously. Oh, thank you very much. And somebody gave him a Rolex watch, and a Rolex watch, you're looking at 50,000 for a good one. So he just graciously accepted it. And then the next minute, another disciple came in and gave Srila Prabhupada a cheap watch. And so Srila Prabhupada very graciously accepted it and took off the Rolex watch. And then somebody else came in and Prabhupada offered him the Rolex watch as a gift, and he kept the cheap one. So that's an ideal illustration of how the spiritual master will just accept things to accept the service when he's not attached. 1 minute he's got a Rolex watch, the next minute he's got a cheap watch. Maybe the cheap watch was worth more than the Rolex in terms of the person was very poor, that gave him that one. and the one that gave him a Rolex was very rich, so to him it didn't mean much to give that away because he had millions anyway. And the poor one, for him, it was maybe a week's wages. So in terms of devotion, that was the most significant offering. So Srila Prabhupada was so transcendental that he didn't look at the object in terms of its material value, but he was able to appreciate the spiritual significance behind it, what it represented, this person's surrender, this person's token of appreciation and affection for him. And one time Srila Prabhupada, he kept getting these really nice shoes given to him, and he couldn't wear them all. So what he would do is he would wear a pair at night while he was sleeping, just to use them. So just for the sake of accepting the service, Srila Prabhupada put them on at night and lay there for the 2 hours that he did rest with these shoes on, just so the person who offered them got the benefit of being engaged by Srila Prabhupada in Krishna's service. So it's a totally different perspective of looking at material objects and seeing them in that way. So if someone has that type of consciousness, then Krishna, he can send along so many things because he knows that they won't distract the person on his spiritual path. So Krishna is careful to regulate what the living entity can accept, so he doesn't become ensnared. And the same happened with Sridham, wasn't it? Sridham approached Krishna. His wife had asked him, "Tell Krishna you're really poor." But when he saw Krishna, he couldn't ask him for anything. He just offered him this candy. He was embarrassed to offer him this little bit of rice, and Krishna accepted it. And when he went home, he didn't recognize where he was at first. And his wife also looked really beautiful, and everything was really, really nice. So Krishna will bestow all opulences upon his devotee. It's not going to distract him, and he can take everything away as well from the devotee. Just depending on whether. Also for preaching, some people would find it attractive to see that a devotee leads a very, very nice lifestyle, and other people would find it attractive to see the devotee leads a very renounced lifestyle with attractive different types of people. Some people would be attracted to the idea that if you take a devotional service, Krishna will fulfill all your desires, give whatever you want. And another interesting angle to look at it from as well, people generally don't look at this so much, but one of the opulences that Krishna can give you is long life, having a long life. Because what's the good of getting all these opulences if it reduces your duration of life, if it excites you and wears out your life energy with passion? Then what is the good of that? And Krishna says in the Ishopanishad, Isha Vasham Idam Sarvam, if you can just accept your quota, then you can live like that for hundreds of years. So if you asked any rich man, if you went up to, some of these people are earning £100 billion a year, $100 billion, and you said to them, okay, well, according to your astrological chart, you'll die when you're 81, but what if I can make you live to your 100, and all you have to do is give away all the money? So they'd be thinking, an extra 19 years, or £700 billion. Okay, give me the 19 years. So there's another opulence as well. If you lead a life where you accept only what your quota is, and then whatever else you get, or even you get your quota and it's more than you need to maintain, and you distribute all the rest to help other people, then you extend the duration of your life, and you can live longer. So if people were being educated properly, they would understand how good karma can lead to even better karma, and can even lead to transcendence. But generally what happens is if you give a person good karma who doesn't have sufficient knowledge, it will immediately turn into bad karma. You look at how many people that have died that had really good karma, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, there's so many of them. If they hadn't had that good karma, they would probably still be alive now. But the good karma destroyed them because they weren't able to utilize it properly. They had the wrong consciousness. in the first place. Too much false ego. And then they became embroiled in material nature's complexities. So this ability to accept your quota and to use things in a devotional way, accept them as opportunities to render devotional service, this is the real art. This is how you can enjoy the material energy, by offering it to Krishna. Just like Ravana took Sita, the opulence, Lakshmi Devi, to try and enjoy himself. And Hanuman, he wanted to serve Lakshmi Devi. So it was Hanuman who got the blessings, not Ravana. Ravana got destroyed. So a clear example of how to enjoy the material energy and how not to enjoy the material energy. If you want to enjoy the opulences of Krishna, then use them in his service. And then everything will be fine. And you'll be well looked after, you'll live a long life, you'll be healthy, you'll be happy. You'll be effulgent, vibrant, joyous, triumphant. All these qualities will be there automatically. Peaceful. And Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, he says, how can there be any happiness if there's no peace? How can a person who's not peaceful be happy? He's too disturbed, too agitated, he can't calm down, settle down and just, okay, well look, you're eating right now, so just eat, don't worry about anything else, just relish this now. Oh no, I need this and I need that, but I can't. There was one man, he was very, very rich, he was wheeling and dealing on the stock market, and he was so embroiled in all the activity and calculating things and shifting money here and shifting money there. And then when he got to his lunchtime, he would dash down out into the street, and the nearest food vendor was selling this real terrible junk food, salami or something. So he would just grab one of those quick, eat it down ravenously, and then run back to carry on his work, So he had so much money, but he was eating in the same way as somebody that had probably no money. So he didn't know how to enjoy his opulence. If he'd have been less greedy, he could have just thought, okay, look, I've got £100 million, that's it now. I'm just going to be satisfied with that. I'll give a lot of it away in charity. I'll eat nice healthy food, and I'll be happy and I'll live long. But people are not doing that. They have, I don't know if they still have that, but they had this thing at one time in London called the yuppies. You heard of yuppies? They were young urban persons, young urban people. So what a yuppie does is he tries to make his fortune by the time he's in his mid-30s, and then they just pull out from the whole system, take their millions, get a cottage in Wales and chill out, and that's all they do for the rest of their life. Try and go in quick, make a lot of money fast, and then get out. But generally people get entangled, they just become more and more greedy. It's funny, isn't it, really, because how much do you need? I mean, at the most you'd need 2 million, right, to be happy for the rest of your life. A couple of £1 million would do, you would never go hungry, you would never want for anything. But why is it that when people make a couple of million, then they have to make 4, then they have to make 8, then 16? It's like, there should be some law, in the government, that once you've got a certain amount, anything else you make after that, you have to give it away in charity, because you don't need it. So why are you accumulating it all? You can unnecessarily powerful, then you can be a threat to the whole system if you have that much. I mean, 100 billion. This guy Elon Musk, he made $100 billion or pounds last year. What are you going to do with that? Well, he's trying to fly to Mars. Could do so much more with that, so many more useful things, couldn't he? So any questions or comments about that? Jadbar is painting a dark picture of the material world. He's referring to it as being a forest. He's referring to any happiness as imaginary. And he's really saying household life as well, and your family members are all are not very, how could you say, desirable. Is there any questions on the, can you see on that? I guess, you know...
They can't hear.
Oh, they can't hear. Or won't hear the question, or was thinking that we...
That's a while ago.
They probably would have given up by now. They'll be sitting there for an hour.
Sachimat and Jaidev. And Laura has a comment, be in the world, not of the world, is what I try to keep in mind and heart.
What was that?
Be in the world, not of the world, is what I try to keep in mind and heart.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Sachimat.
No, Laura.
Oh, sorry, Laura. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, it's referred to as the lotus flower. The lotus flower is in the pond, but it's not touching the water. So we're in the material world, but we don't allow it to touch us. And one time, Brahmananda said to Srila Prabhupada, I thought when we engaged in devotional service, that would free us from the influence of the modes of nature, but I still feel the influence of the modes of the material nature. And Prabhupada said, you're on a ship, so you're not being directly touched by the water, but you're being rocked by the material energy. So sometimes when people are on the ship, they get seasick, and so they jump over the ship into the sea again, and their seasickness goes because they drown. So that's what we can do. That's what Prabhupada called looping. But yeah, we're in the material world and we're getting knocked about sometimes by the modes of material nature. But if we continue on with our chanting and following the principles and assimilating the philosophy, then we can remain aloof, and our aloofness increases as we make progress. We become less shaken around by the ship. We become steadier and steadier. And the ship is going, it's heading towards Goloka Vrindavan. That's its destination. And you just have to hang on, stay on the ship. There's a nice painting, isn't there, of Srila Prabhupada, and he's on a ship, and in the ocean people are doing all kinds of horrible things, and Srila Prabhupada's pulling them in with a rope. They're coming out of the ocean of Kali Yuga onto this beautiful golden ship, which is sailing home back to Godhead. So we're on the ocean, but we're not in the ocean. We're not flailing around in different stages of drowning. We've climbed out of the ocean, and maybe we're still a bit wet, and we're drying off on deck, but at least we're homeward bound now. We're making progress. Going there. Whereas people are not. If you're flailing around in the ocean drowning, you're not really making any progress at all. You're just getting ready for your next birth. And generally it won't be a human form or higher. It'll be something lower down in the scale of 8,400,000 species. So Krishna's, he's not going to force anybody. It's only if you want Krishna, then fine. You can have me, think of me, desire me, and I'm there for you. If you don't want me, if you don't really want me, then fine. There's the material world. There's 14 planetary systems. There's all the different species of life. Go ahead. Go and try on your own. And when you're fed up and you're really exhausted with material life, then I'm there. I'm waiting for you. Sooner the better. Jai. Iskam Guru ki jai,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai,
Jai.
Nitai Gaur Premanandi.
Praise the God, Krishna Prabhu.
Jai.
Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
See that the sound.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.